Good afternoon, councillors. Apologies for the delay, and especially apologies to those who have been waiting outside. Welcome to the Planning Regulatory Committee meeting. We will get ourselves underway. Firstly, I have apologies from Her Worship the Mayor. Councillor Davey is indicating that he needs to leave shortly, and Councillor Copeland. Do I have a motion that apologies be sustained? Moved. Councillor Barker, seconded. Councillor Ward, those in favour? Against, carried. Just a confirmation of all of the business. What we'll do is that we'll, as per the agenda, we'll do the public forum and then we'll break for lunch and then reconvene the meeting after that. Just a reminder that any members have any interest they need to, they can declare them at the appropriate time or update the register. Right, public forum. I'd like to invite, is it Karina Shannon and Tony Allen, or Tonya, sorry, is it Tonya, sorry, Tonya Allen, to speak about a rental warrant of fitness trial. Yes, certainly, Mary Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you to councillors. You'll remember that at the last Planning and Reg meeting, myself and Hilary Mitchell spoke about the idea of a rental warrant of fitness. Most of you were here, I think, and that Brian then sent that off for a report, which I believe is coming back to council today, which gives us the opportunity to address the idea a little bit more again. And I have invited today Karina Shannon, who's a landlord. She's going to talk about it, and Tonya Allen is a property manager for Bailey's. So they are going to speak to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Speaking as a group, usual, I think the advisors have told you about 10 minutes.
Total of 10 minutes? Yep.
Well, good afternoon.
Oh, kia ora koutou. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a little bit nerve-wracking, but here goes anyway. I guess when Mary Ellen approached me, I thought, you know, I didn't feel like I was maybe the best person to speak to it because we've just got one property, and she said, no, that you're absolutely fine. That's, you know, that's the situation for quite a number of people anyway. So I guess when there's a few points that I'd like to make briefly. One is that I feel like being a landlord is a privilege, and that I want to do that as well as I possibly can. And so the idea of developing a housing warrant of fitness is, it feels like it would be a very positive thing for me and any tenants that would be, you know, using our property for housing. So, and also I think that that's the biggest asset apart from my own home that I'm ever going to own. So, unless Lotto comes up with the business, but it hasn't so far. So I think I need to plan on the probabilities rather than the fantasies. And I feel like I need to look after that asset as well as I possibly can. So having a checklist like this warrant of fitness trial that's currently happening in a couple of parts of New Zealand was a really useful thing for my partner and I to sit down and have a look through and think, could we tick this all off? And pretty much we could, apart from a couple of things I learned from that about safety stays on windows, which made perfectly good sense and already on most of the windows, but there's a couple we could add them to. And I hadn't realised that it's our responsibility to look after, you know, the battery for the smoke alarm, but again, makes perfectly good sense. And my partner said, I actually do that every daylight savings anyway, so there you go, you don't always know what the right hand's doing, so that was good to know. I guess the other thing is that it's an opportunity to be proactive about that. I feel like there's a really genuine move to be, you know, to be seen to be a good landlord and to be proactive about what that would look like. So something like the housing warrant of fitness feels like a really, really positive step in the right direction for that to happen. And I guess it would also give me the opportunity to maybe get something like a seal of approval or whatever that differentiates me and my practice as a landlord from people who are not of the same value or mind as I am, so that, you know, I can rent my house in the full knowledge that I'm doing and being what I would see a good landlord would be practicing. So yeah, I think I think that's mostly it. I think, you know, I also work in education, and I see the results on a very regular basis of children who are currently living in poor housing, and the impact that has on their health on a day-to-day basis, where they just almost, you know, have colds for 4 months of the year or worse. And you know, I have a daughter as well who suffers from really severe asthma, and how that's been really compromised in the past when she's lived in rental accommodation that's been damp and really made that situation so much worse for you. So I think if I'm a good landlord, I benefit from that as a person, my tenants benefit from that, and my community benefits from that as well. So I can't think of a single reason not to have a warrant of fitness. Yeah. So kia ora for the opportunity.
Kia ora, thank you. Quite happy.
Stay there.
You might want to stay in case we've got some questions.
Tonya might answer all of that.
I'm Tonya Allen. I'm the Divisional Manager for the Rental Department at Bailey's. Just a little tiny bit of background, know that you're very pushed for time. Basically, I owned and managed my own rental division, which was Ray White Nelson, bought in October by Bailey's, so I now merged the two companies together. That's how we sort of came about with Bailey's being linked in with me. Have done that previously, worked for Haven. So I have worked for a number of years as a property manager and have seen a fair range of properties from the high end to the very, very low end. For me personally, a warrant of fitness I think is a very, very good idea, purely for the fact that, to me, I look at it and it's a user pay system in today's society. People are paying good money, they're working hard, long hours, and a lot of our rentals in Nelson, we have some of the highest rental prices in New Zealand. And I think that basically people should be entitled that when you're paying for something, you get what you pay for. And that is, it's just a right that you should have a property that is clean, tidy, warm, secure. So for me, I think that that's a really important thing, that when somebody is in a property as a rental, that they know that what they're paying for is the basics that they're entitled to. And that is that they have a warm home for their children, they have a place that doesn't leak, it doesn't have excessive moisture, and there are really, really basic steps that you can go to make sure that your house complies with that, and it doesn't have to be excessive with double glazing or anything like that. And that's why we looked at the draft form that came through from the government, and we started looking at local companies that we could get on board with us. We've started looking at developing our own warrant of fitness that we're doing as a business within Bailey's, to make sure that our landlords comply with what we believe is a basic need for our rentals, so that we know that we're a step ahead, basically, of the competition, because that's what it's all about, and making sure that our rentals are at the forefront of making sure that our landlords know what they need to have, and it's a basic responsibility that our tenants are getting what they pay for, because it really is a cyclic design. If you don't have happy tenants, you don't have rent, it's the end of your rental basically. It's going to sit vacant. And when you're comparing apples with apples and you've got a property that's warm, clean, tidy, has the basics, HRV, has nice heating, is warm, doesn't leak, and you put it up against something that has no heating, you know which one's going to win. So that's basically why we set up putting forward a basic warrant of fitness within our company that we're putting forward to our landlords, to make sure that they're ticking those boxes, making sure that they have security in place, that the smoke alarms and all that we check anyway as part of all our checks. They're basics as per the RTA, but going above and beyond. So.
Thank you, Tonya. Got a few minutes for questions. So I've got Councillor Laurie, then Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for the presentations. A couple of questions. Karina, one of the things, and I should mention I'm a landlord too, and one of the things that worries me about the rental market is the way some property investors get in and out quite a lot, and that can create a stressful situation for tenants who find themselves having to find new accommodation more often than they'd like. And so my question to you is, do you think that a warrant of fitness might discourage property speculators from getting into the rental market?
I find that difficult to answer because I don't know too much what drives property speculators. I guess for me, you know, it feels like a privilege to have the opportunity to be a landlord, and as Tonya was saying, if it's going well, then it's a win-win because it's a profitable and healthy business. So I guess I would like to think that it might make someone think twice if purely speculation was the motivation for owning a rental property.
Right. Through the chair, could I ask you, Tonya, as well, what you think about
Sure.
that?
Basically, most investors that we find are looking for a return of anywhere from 5 to 7. Minimum's usually around 5. If they've got a property, they're going to be looking at what the return's been, and when you're bringing in warrant of fitnesses and things like that, that is going to change the ante as to what sort of rental and rental price these properties will get when you're comparing them against other ones that have got those entities, because the landlord therefore isn't going to have to go in and do anything, so they're purely basing it on the return that they're currently getting, not the return they're currently getting, and then I'm going to have to add some. So it is, I think it will have an effect on the market. If it comes in, there will be people who look at that and go, oh, okay, what will I have to do? If it's already done, I think it'll be a great turn-on for people looking to sell as investors, and I think they'll be more long-term because they won't have to really do anything to it.
So my point of clarification, are you saying that it would hopefully create more certainty
Yep.
for people who are renting?
I think it would. People who are our investors that we get, we always clarify with them, is this long-term or is it short-term? Because we need to know, because it's one of the first things we get asked.
Okay, and my other question very quickly.
Need to share around, Councillor.
And one more, really quickly?
One more.
Okay, so it says in the report that there's concern that if we were to introduce a warrant of fitness for housing, that would increase rentals. Do you believe that? You guys believe that? The cost of renting, that is.
I personally don't think it will. The market fluctuates itself. You've got so many entities out there, that's how we gauge our rental prices based on when you're comparing apples to apples. It's, if everybody's doing this, you're still comparing apples to apples. They won't really, I don't think they'll boost the house up because it becomes just a necessity. You should have this. So therefore it's not a point of difference that pushes the house up, because that's usually the only reason the price will go up against something else.
My sense that it would work out something like $1 a week, and I don't think that would give you any grounds to raise it.
You've really got to have a point of difference to push a house above something that's similar.
Okay. Councillor Ward? Yeah.
The reception that people rent because they can't afford to buy, is that perception that, you know, they rent because they can't afford to buy, and that would be true for some, is it always true?
Not always, no. It's because you've got a more transient lifestyle now. You've got people, they change jobs all the time. You don't know next week what some person's job's going to suddenly do or how it's going to change. A lot of people like that flexibility to be able to basically move out of a property to a new job, but it also comes down to the fact that they can't get that initial deposit. That is a big
The
saving.
affordability is
Yep, it's just the deposit. They can afford the mortgage repayment. It's just actually getting that initial deposit that sometimes strikes as the hard bit.
The second question is, are tenants more likely to be good tenants in good properties?
Not always, no. You can have a what we would call a lower grade property, and you can have the best tenants in the world, and they will treat that property like an absolute castle. It does not determine, price does not determine accountability on your property. And that's where we make sure it's our checks. It's, you know, the starting point, do the checks properly, that's going to determine the type of tenants you get in there. Take the time to do the checks, that's where your tenancy will run smoothly, right at the start.
welcome back, councillors. We now have a quorum, so I'll reconvene the meeting. In light of the fact we still have members who are at the public forum still present, with your indulgence, I will bring up item 10, and we'll deal with that first, and then move on to the confirmation of minutes. Yeah, is Mr. Martin Brown nearby? He was here. Martin Brown, manager building. Here, Mr. Brown. Decided we'll deal with your matter first. I'll just bring it up. Page 37 to 39. Yeah. Right. Now, councillors should have a replacement table page held by page 38. It was a formatting area in the copy that was distributed, and the electronic copy, which is obscured, paragraph 5.3. So you should have a paragraph 5.3 in its entirety. Yes, please. Ms. Martin.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The paragraph that was missing from the report that was circulated states, the idea of warrants of fitness is supported. However, there are concerns around the legislation being used, cost recovery, and potential impacts on lessees. It would seem prudent to assess the success of the warrant of fitness process once it has been undertaken for a period by both Wellington and Dunedin City Councils.
Have members got that? Right, thank you. Mr. Brown, welcome. Take it the report's been read, but any matters that you would like to highlight or add to your report?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, having listened to the public forum today, interesting take on how it would benefit, I guess, landlords and agents, and the words endorsement being used slightly worried me. But I guess for us, it's really around what we've got to understand what we are trying to achieve from any warrant of fitness regime that's put in place. What is the intention? And clearly, obviously, with two other councils who are part of the pilot undertaking this as their sort of normal business now going forward, some of the concerns I've raised within my paper, I'm hoping there will be some precedential information forthwith as they hit challenges that I predict they may encounter in undertaking rental housing warrants of fitness.
Thank you. Happy to take any questions?
Yep.
Any questions? Councillor, I'll take Councillor Laurie, Councillor Matheson, Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the report. Just a few questions from me. One, at 6.2 it says, for the reasons identified in Table 1 and potential cost and staff resourcing implications which have not been quantified. Just wondered why those costs weren't quantified. It would have been useful to know what sort of costs the council would face by implementing a warrant of fitness, just to give us an idea.
I'm just thinking, so through you, Mr. Chair, I guess the situation we have is that depending on how you formulate any regime of undertaking warrants of fitness, i.e. timeframes of how you will do it, resources of how you will actually meet the need, understanding the level of rental properties this would actually relate to, was something that I hadn't put together as an initial for this report, purely because I figured I wanted to go back with a general indication of where it's at for us as a BCA or a building unit. Those costs would take some time to try and arrive at, and a bit of research as well, and I guess at that point that's something that may be determined from this meeting today.
Okay, my other question, just quickly through the chair, is it's suggested here that the introduction of a warrant of fitness might lead to rents going up. What is that based on, that view, please?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the conclusion that was drawn from the review of the information that has been provided is the situation that is potential here, or there is a potential risk of, is the low end rental market is, I guess, the area where we would likely see the potential problems with properties. In the event that there was a mechanism to advise people of the issues and potentially move to some level of requiring them to upgrade their properties, would obviously incur costs, and there could be, in some cases, considerable costs, and that may push those rentals to a higher level, which then mean that those persons wanting to rent those properties would not be able to afford it. So that was the impact I was trying to look at when I was writing this report, is what is the likely risk of having these and trying to require people to do more work on their properties.
And through you, Mr. Chair, if I can just add to that, that is partly why the recommendation is as it stands, that we allow 12 months to see where Wellington and Dunedin get to, for that very reason. We're unable at this point in time to give sort of really good advice around what those costs might be, because we just haven't run it. And those two councils are currently running it, and they'll be able to get actual, what have been the impacts, what have been the costs, both for the council and potentially for those that might move into rental properties.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you had any discussions with rental property managers similar to the guest speaker this morning from Bailey's?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not at this present time.
Would I be right in, if I can just carry this couple more questions, would I be right in saying that that they didn't feel there was a big cost associated with putting together a warrant of fitness?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the indications that I obviously heard as well this morning, they felt that in their situations it wouldn't cause them an additional cost.
And finally, quickly, do you think it would be worth trying to meet those folk and put together what we would possibly call a draft policy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might be best to answer that one. At this point in time, we haven't scoped out the likely cost implications of this from the point of view of resourcing for council staff to be able to go out and roll out the warrant of fitness scheme, so what additional staff requirements we might have. In addition to that, we haven't looked at what the costs may be on a particular situation of somebody that's renting a property and the landlords that actually run properties. So if somebody has a home that's of a standard that's high currently, their cost is going to be quite small. However, there will be other homes where that's not the case, and they are required to undertake quite a bit of work to get up to the standard that would be expected through the building warrant of fitness scheme. So we haven't done that, which is partly why we've said, let's run an actual real-life example through Wellington and Dunedin for 12 months, and we'll have some more data which will be factual based on that, because at the moment we just don't know.
I'll come back to it later.
I've got a question in terms of the other centres which participated. I've got three questions actually through the chair. The other centres which participated in the study, so there was Christchurch, Dunedin, Tauranga and Wellington. Were there reasons why Christchurch and Tauranga city councils decided not to sort of pursue the warrant of fitness?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any specific reasons why the other councils have not chosen to continue this. I mean, I could look into finding out, but obviously for some reason Wellington and Dunedin have seen benefit in it and have moved to make this part of their daily business as usual. And
my next question through the chair is, how are Wellington and Dunedin funding implementing this warrant of fitness regime?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at the point in time I have not had that contact with Wellington to understand how they're actually recovering costs or dealing with this rollout.
But through you, Mr Chair, there is an addendum to that, so we're not sure of the actual costs of what they're charging, which would be cost recoverable because they would charge the person that's going for the building warrant of fitness. But there is a bigger question which Mr Brown can address, and that is around legislatively. We're not entirely sure at this point in time whether we can actually recover the costs for this. And so Mr Brown could potentially add to that.
So through you, the Chair, there's a couple of queries raised within my paper here around legislation which has been cited in discussions with the organisers of Otago University organisers of this initial pilot, and they've cited to me two pieces of legislation, i.e. the Building Act under section 124, which is dangerous and insanitary buildings. They've also cited the Home Improvements, I'll get it right, thank you very much, the Housing Improvement Act of 1947 as another mechanism. So there are some concerns around certainly that second piece of legislation, around the enforceability, because I guess for us, if we're going to go out and tell people what they need to do, to actually get the effect of the warrant of fitness to resolve the issues that we see, we would have to have a level of, I guess, power or authority or enforcement to move forward. We can go and tell a poor property owner that they need to do work, but unless we can enforce if they don't do it, then I guess the efficiency in the net gain is potentially lost.
Can I just clarify, sorry, it's not clear to me, is Mary Ellen wanting it to be compulsory that all houses in the rental market have a warrant of fitness, or is she wanting there to be a point of difference between houses which have a warrant of fitness and houses which don't? Was her intention that it be compulsory, or was her intention that we just begin to implement a process of
has a warrant of fitness.
So in the next year, just would it not be possible in the next year to have a voluntary, to see if there's a voluntary uptake? I mean, we've just heard two people present saying that this is something they would like to do as good landlords and as good property managers, that they would be implementing it anyway. I'm presuming if it's something which you could volunteer to participate in, that the acts and the law would no longer matter if it's not something we're obligating people to do.
So through you, the Chair, I guess if agents and landlords wish to adopt a check sheet of things that they think they should be including and would give them a market standard or a high standard or some endorsement, that would be their choice, I guess, as a council organisation and as the BCA. If we're doing warrants of fitness, so we do warrants of fitness for commercial buildings and it's covered under legislation, and there's infringement requirements and things like that if they don't comply. What we're talking about here is possibly a tangible way that landlords and, from what I heard this morning, landlords and rental agents could do something that gives them an endorsement, and I guess we've got to be careful how that's viewed, around a property being in a certain condition. The way the Building Act's set up is more around minimum standards and making sure that people are safe. I sense from this morning's discussion the landlords and agents who might be happy to do that are seeing it as a point of difference and a point of showing that their properties are above a standard, and that's a good thing. And I guess that's what we need to be clear on, the differences.
I've just got one subsequent question based on what I've just heard. Could we not then in the next year, like at the moment we have Richard Popenhagen who goes out and assesses homes for warmth and looks at insulation, and he goes out and does that for free. He will go into people's homes and assess them and look at ways to improve it. Could we not set up some kind of system whereby we are giving a Nelson City Council endorsement to houses which are meeting certain criteria, which is not, it's not compulsory at this point in time, but to see if there's an uptake in that, because that's what I'm hearing is that the landowners would. Yeah, no, my question is, could we look at doing that in the next year?
So through you, Mr Chair, at this point in time, I would say that we don't have a staff resource that would be available to undertake that work, because otherwise we're looking at extra costs for council, because we'd need to get an external or another person to be doing that check. Richard Copenhagen, when he does go out with his eco-advisor hat on, is looking more broadly, making sure that things are, of a standard. So there is that advisory component that he adds to it. But if we're looking at something even on a voluntary basis, where you have a check sheet which is specifically around building warrant of fitnesses for rental houses, that will require additional staff resource, and at this time we don't have it.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence. I'm not on this committee, but I do have an interest in this topic. I haven't looked at the Otago model, but I have looked at the Beehive draft that's come out, and I've looked. Can you tell me if there are any major differences between those two models? The reason why I'm saying that is that I've looked at the Beehive model, and I don't think there's anything terribly onerous. If you were the owner of a property, I don't think there's anything there that's a major exclamation mark. But is there a major difference between those two? Just wondering why they're running beside each other.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I just have to try and clarify. So when you say the Beehive,
the government, there's a five-page document that they outline what actually they look pretty minimal.
Yeah. So from what I've seen of what was provided through the last through the submission by voice, that was the sheet that was attached in that. Ah, right. Okay. That's okay.
So through Mr. Chair, as I understand it, the government aren't looking to propose that. It was just a discussion document, I think, Councillor Noonan, at this point in time. Yeah.
Which is a helpful start. But does the Otago model go further than that?
So from what I've read of the Otago model, it talks about standard minimums or minimum standards that is pulled from the Housing Improvements Act and what they deem to expect to be provided in a dwelling or a property. So it's based on what are the basic needs of a dwelling. So I'd have to look at the Beehive's equivalent and see if there's anything there obvious.
One more, Mr. Chair. Another viewpoint or a thought that crosses my mind is that if we adopt any sort of method of a minimum standard, are any of these proposals, do they have any loans or funding opportunities? Because we've had the conversation, Mr. Chair, about the fact that it may be onerous on a property owner, especially if they have a mortgage on the property. There's probably very little fat in it each year. Obviously some things will cost a little more than others, so I just wondered whether there was, certainly not this year because we haven't got any capacity, but whether that can go into the thinking when some policy is drafted to assist the landlords to fund it.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I guess that's a discussion that I'd have to have with my GM around that as a policy direction, if that was where we were to head.
I think my question's been largely answered around what Kate was talking about, but did we actually look at any other models or any other measures we might implement to get the same outcomes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not at this point.
We can talk about the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened to all the comment today and read the report, and I've reached my own conclusion, and I believe that the recommendation is the appropriate one. We have not consulted. To go into something like this would require, under the Local Government Act, a consultative procedure. I believe if we monitor what's happening in the two that are doing it, we're not reinventing the wheel. We can consult our community, and we can consult Local Government New Zealand to see that a standard procedure is being followed throughout the country, and we can enter into it at that stage. I see there's lots of merits in it, but at this stage we've got no jurisdiction for going into it and doing it. We have an opportunity to learn from how others are doing it before we try and reinvent the wheel, and I will move the recommendation.
Both parts, we'll move it at the appropriate time, but we're still taking questions. You finished with the questions? Collins?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Through the chair, we were discussing earlier whether this was voluntary or not. I know at this stage it probably doesn't matter too much because we're just observing. But if it was voluntary, is it not more likely to push the prices up of homes that have got it? But if it's, because it becomes a point of difference, so people will charge more because they have this point of difference. Whereas if everyone has to do it, then they were saying that it wouldn't push. It seemed like people who came in this morning did not seem to think it would push the prices up if we did it like that, if everybody had to do it. But if it was voluntary, it could provide a point of difference and push the prices up. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions, if I may. How are Wellington and Dunedin enforcing it? Has there been any discussion around that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In response to that, so this is one of the reasons why we want to see what happens, because through what I've read and through what we've researched in putting this paper together, the enactments do have some level one of the enactments does have a level of enforcement, the Building Act, under the Section 124, which is the insanitary or dangerous buildings. There's a lot of definition and interpretation required when you're dealing with that, and we've only probably had a couple of dangerous buildings for a long time in Nelson that have actually triggered that response. Under the Housing Improvement Act, there is no enforcement for general standards. There is an enforcement if we have overcrowding, and that sums to about $40 fine. So there is quite an old piece of legislation. So I guess for us, we'd have to, this is why we want to wait and see what comes out of the first year of Dunedin and Wellington.
And one more question, if I may. So has this model been based off something that's been successful internationally, or is this a very new idea that's come around very recently?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't comment on the international side of it. I know that there was a pilot run, as advised through Otago University, which picked up a number of councils who committed to having a test pilot of this, and to obviously go back and feedback on how that was received and how that went. Okay.
I've got an amendment, but I don't know if it was seconded, was it? No, but I can foreshadow an alternative recommendation.
What's the cost that's borne by the building owner?
So, Mr.
Yeah, so
Mr. Chair, sorry.
You get an independent qualified person to come in, an IPQ or IQP?
Yep. So the current system, and I just put a bit of background, so yes, under the Building Act there is a requirement for building warrants of fitness to be undertaken around compliance schedules and items on those compliance schedules. At the moment, the compliance that's undertaken by the council is based on independent qualified persons undertaking those checks every year for fire services, ventilation and the like. As a result, that cost to us, there's a revenue cost for that, obviously for them to get their building warrants of fitness. I don't have any information on how much that actual additional cost to the owner of the commercial property has to bear as a result of that, because it would be probably quite sizable depending on the building and quite site specific as well.
Okay, that takes me to the next question. Is there a public good element to it, or is it 100% revenue from the building owner?
To Mr. Chair, so the public good, I guess, of having compliance systems or systems being monitored within a building is that there is a safety issue there. Yeah. So we want to make sure that the buildings are continuing to be safe. So
I'm just the point I'm making: is there a cost that is borne by the council to administer that scheme that's not passed on to the building owner?
Mr. Chair, there is a revenue stream that comes in. I couldn't tell you whether it's subsequently funded by any ratepayer money. I'd have to look into that. Okay, then
that's a gap that we've probably got. In terms of the legislative regime, you talk about the Building Improvement Act 1947. That's probably beyond, well before our time, I think. So just sort of help me understand, that's a piece of basically post-war legislation dealing with slum housing or something like that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I did have a good look through this, and what it sets to state is certain things that should be expected to be in a dwelling. And if you will allow me, I'll just sort of put a couple of comments through here. So it talks about adequate room used, capable of being used as a living room. It talks about a kitchen. It talks about a room used or intended to be used as a bedroom. It talks about a bathroom. It talks about water closets and even mentions privies for the exclusive use of the occupants. So you can see at the time it was written, it was very much about getting a housing standard that we would absolutely expect as a bare minimum nowadays. So that's where it's sort of coming from. This obviously underpinned the current building regulations to a certain extent as around what is minimum standards, but it is still in play. It is still an enactment that's in place, and I guess for us it does provide a background to why we are where we are at the moment, but just a bit of background as to why that enactment is there.
How far they are through that trial, and when we can expect either preliminary or final results?
Through Mr. Chair, I can find that out. I'm understanding they have kicked these off. As to when, I would need to check that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for letting me have another go, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I'm just wondering, in this work, was any thought given to ways that perhaps Nelson City might engage with Dunedin and Wellington in their trials?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, not specifically through this response to this paper.
But through you, Mr. Chair, we intend to follow up regularly with staff at both councils to find out how things are progressing, and that would form part of reporting back as per the recommendation.
Okay, I was just wondering, Mr. Chairman, through you, whether there might be a way that we can support what they are doing. I don't know how, but...
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's certainly something we're happy to explore in terms of making contact with them and saying, you know, even if we can give them some moral support, which might be part of it, so that we can also learn from them, that would, yeah.
No questions? Councillor Barker, you've moved.
And in so doing, just remind us that if we had put this in our annual plan or some other document to tell the community we are considering this thing, because we consider it's a very good thing for our people, are you happy that this be done? And we are required to consult, and I think if we went ahead and did other than what's being recommended today, we could be pulled up. So I'm moving the staff recommendation to receive the report and to reassess the merits of a warrant of fitness for housing scheme in May 2017, which gives us opportunity to monitor totally exactly how it's gone in Wellington and Dunedin and learn from their mistakes rather than us getting in and making our mistakes.
It's been moved. Do I have a seconder? Second, Mrs. Payne. Okay, we'll deal with it. Well, we'll open it.
Might as well move my amendment.
We're in debate now, so
I'd like to.
you got an amendment?
Yeah. So the second part of the recommendation, I'd like to read, and that the Planning and Regulatory Committee continue to assess the merits of a warrant of fitness for rental housing scheme with a view to
do you want to draft
asking
something
for
out?
feedback on such a scheme in the long-term plan. Because I think that we can go out and ask for feedback on implementing such a scheme during the long-term plan.
Have you got something second, Councillor? You can't second. Yeah, you'll need to write it out, Councillor Fultons, and we'll
Do you
put
want me to
up.
write it out? I'll just speak to it really briefly. So my intention is that actually I think that there are merits. I don't think we need to reassess the merits. I think there are merits. What would be good to have happen in the next year is to see how other councils are implementing it, and to hopefully it would be fairly straightforward to copy their work, and then hopefully include something in the long-term plan so we can go out and consult on it. So we're trying to put it into the cogs now rather than waiting a year before we begin to do that.
I understand. So we'll take an adjournment for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Give you time to write it down, give it to the AA so we can put it up.
I might need a bit of help just with the wording.
right.
I'll talk with Claire.
Or in German. Councillor Fulton, you've got your resolution.
I think EJ's got it. So what I'm happy with is that we have the words "and that the Planning and Regulatory Committee consider a warrant of fitness for rental housing scheme in May 2017. So that the next report that comes back, we already know what the merits are, and that the next report is that step further forward, and that then that can feed into the long-term plan. So I'm really happy with that change to the words. I guess one of the reasons why I'm very supportive of this warrant of fitness is that, first of all, it's come from our community. Our community's asked us for it, and I think that's a wonderful, wonderful initiative. And secondly, it aligns with our with Goal 9 of our Nelson 2060 vision, that everyone in our community has their essential needs met. And I think that this is a wonderful way to start showing that that our Vision 2060 is more than just words, that as a council we are working with our community to take steps to ensure that that we are trying to reach those goals. So thank you very much for
We'll just wait for it to be...
submitting on that.
Waiting for technical difficulties. Here we are.
Great.
Right, we're speaking to the amendment. So it's been moved, Councillor, the amendments have been moved and seconded.
I'll second it, yes.
Yeah, this is the amendment. Right, speaking to the amendment.
I am speaking to the amendment. I'm supportive of the amendment. I like the idea of a warrant of fitness for rental housing very much. I think the benefits completely outweigh the negatives by a ton. But one issue I have is that under our present legal requirements, landlords do not need to provide a permanent, fixed heating source. And I have real concerns about that, given the cost of power, given the coldness of our winters, and given the lack of insulation, adequate insulation in some rental properties. And under our present rules, all landlords need to provide is a power point, and I don't think that's good enough. So I would hope that when this time comes and we do this work, that the issue of permanent fixed heating and the provision of permanent fixed heating is seriously considered.
I suppose my concern is that it just does nothing for a year. And my concern is that it simply, it says, well, this is the only way we could make a difference. And I would like to think that there are things we are already doing that in fact are making a difference. We might do differently, we might do better. There might be other measures we could put in place. It also, you know, the idea that somehow if we do it, rents will get higher, therefore we shouldn't do it too soon, and assumes that nobody would, you know, just because you can't enforce it right now, nobody's going to act on it. The idea that we're actually out there already saying, actually it's a good idea, and we're going to do this whenever we can, if, you know, once it's possible. And these are the likely steps you're going to have to meet up with. Would be enough for folk to say, actually, you know, what measures have you already got in place to enable it to happen? What else can council do to incentivise or encourage it to happen? The warrant of fitness is one way. The assumption that everybody will try to dodge it is wrong. Most landlords and landladies, I would suggest, in fact, will want to get it right. It's in their interest to get it right. Most will want to do it well. So I would like to see us do this as soon as possible. Even if we couldn't implement it right now, we'd have some measures in place to say, this is where we're going. This is what we want to see in our city. And these are, you know, and here are some of the things we've got in place already. We have Richard Copenhagen. What else, you know, but they're not new things necessarily, but some of them might need to be tweaked a little bit. So I would suggest that we explore other measures for getting the same outcome in the interim. We'll continue to explore. I think we already are. Well, that's, okay, we'll put that, similarly, if you're happy with that, and continue other measures to meet the same outcomes in the interim.
With respect to Councillor Ward, I think.
Well, just add it on.
Right. There's two options. One is that you can put up a second amendment, and we then deal with that.
Or
we ask with the leave of the move and the seconder to.
That's right.
So I've got a question, probably for Claire through the chair. If we included that, Claire, when I asked before, 3 questions, you said that there wasn't staff resources to do that kind of thing. So I'm very supportive of Mike's intention, and I guess that was what my initial idea was, but I'm aware that staff resourcing capacity is perhaps not there. I guess Richard Copenhagen's already doing that. He's already doing what Mike's seeking in that we offer a free service to people to try and improve the insulation and warmth of their homes. And so in my mind, in the interim, that's happening. Do we need some words around it?
Doesn't undermine what you've already got. You just added something else.
Yeah, I'm just worried that the staff don't have time to do it, and so I think I'm happy with that. I think that we're actually asking quite a lot of the staff in the next year that they have to go out and monitor what's happening in 2 other cities and come back to us with quite a serious plan, and I think that that's enough in the meantime. Yeah, but I'm sure that the staff will be happy to look at ways in the interim we can support people in rental housing.
You happy with that, Councillor Ward? Sort of.
No, not at all. Actually, I think it's taken second best, and even if all that was done was a report of this went out, even if some landlords said actually hadn't really thought about that advice is there, I'll take it in this hadn't thought of it in this context. Even if the warm homes initiative got somebody else looking at it as a consequence, that would be worthwhile. Even if the staff were looking as they were going about and saying, actually, the council did have that in mind, we can do that right now with this conversation. Just, there'll be things that they could do if it was on their radar without, having to go out and do a huge amount of extra work. I would like them thinking about it right now in this context, in the context of a warrant of fitness at some stage in the future. So it doesn't undermine what you're intending to do, but it just simply says, actually, we'd like you to think about this as well. Extra work?
I think that maybe that could be minuted. I'm sure the staff are doing that anyway. I really think
well,
the
then
staff
add it on. Why not add it on?
We're getting bogged down in the process. I hear the sentiment you're expressing there, Councillor Ward, and I think that that's probably, and it's a matter that will be considered. As I said, the staff report is that there are a limited resource. They've got an indication of what the will of the.
Gives it more clout.
Okay, we're happy to put it in. Just the words, and that staff continue to find non-regulatory ways to support the outcomes intended of a warrant of fitness. Yeah.
Well, we've got the warm home. You've got the eco advisor.
So.
We need somebody to put the words up.
Can we have the words, please?
Kate had it right.
I'd set them out loud, and that staff continue to use non-regulatory approaches to support
the outcomes of warrant of fitness.
to support the intentions of a warrant of fitness for rental housing scheme in the interim.
Can I provide some advice?
Yeah.
The only person that currently goes out into the field who could do some of this is the eco-advisor. He does do it, so if he's out at a property and he sees something that could potentially be fixed, he will suggest it. So he's already doing that, but if you want something more than that, and I'm not sure what it is, then I need to know, because there will be potential implications for resourcing if it's more than that.
I don't think we're looking for more than that. I think that Councillor Ward's looking that that's included, and so for things like if we're looking at our housing issue, if it comes up in the future in future discussions, that there's those opportunities there. You know, that if a staff member saw an opportunity to do something more then it's endorsed by council.
So the way that it currently reads is it says non-regulatory actions. That could be quite broad, and that has cost implications too.
Right.
So
No, it doesn't necessarily.
It says continue to use, so really that's what Richard's doing. It's probably reaffirming that actually we're doing that already.
yeah,
Right.
We don't like it.
Right. No, we haven't. We've still got a speaking order, and we're still dealing with the amendment.
Start arguing against it.
Thank you. I support the warrant of fitness for rental housing scheme in principle, and we've had a report from staff about, you know, why this should not happen at the moment. And at the risk of reiterating what Councillor Barker has said, I think the original motion in the papers, consider reassess, it says it actually is reflective of everything that we've amended up there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, but and I'm going to have a say anyway. I'm actually quite supportive of what Councillor Ward's talking about, because we had a very good indication this morning from a very good presentation that managers of properties were quite happy to develop a warrant of fitness. The lady from Bailey said that quite clearly. They've set their own standards. Why can't we ask them? They have got a body, and is it the property investors or someone like that? Why can't we ask them to sit down and come up with a draft for us that we can have a look at? I mean, the Act's 1947. Also included in this debate should be the health and safety regulations, which we've just changed. But I believe that we should go to the source of the interest first of all, and they were in this room this morning, and say, hey guys, can you sit down and give us a draft on what you think to be the basic requirements that we will need in a warrant of fitness for rental properties? That should be our first start. Then we know the cost implications. We know if we know if people can afford it. We'll talk to property investors and say, is it going to change your rental system? we need that debate with the people who are on the floor first, then come back to us. And when they get back to us, then you might have a fair idea that you might be able to bring something in 2017. Now, what I'm saying is I'm totally in favour, but I think we start afresh with the people who are actually on the ground. And they've been here this morning and I thought gave an excellent presentation to us and very balanced as well. So I'm going to support it.
Procedural question. Can I speak to the
We've
second?
lost the quorum, so the meeting's adjourned.
Can I ask?
Right, everyone's spoken. We'll deal with the amendment. The amendment is as up on the board. Oh, sorry, Mr. Collins.
Just a quick thing. Could just something in general. I'm just seeing if it suggests is that maybe you could send literally just a document / something. You know how you send out the log burner thing, or you have a flyer down there. Just having something that says things you can do to work towards this goal or something.
It's all a resourcing issue. I appreciate that, but we'll deal with the amendment. Yeah, we'll deal with the amendment. So I'll put the amendment as up on the board. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? I'll ask for a show of hands. Those in favour? 5. Against? 1. The amendment is carried. Put the substantive amendment. That becomes the substantive amendment, becomes the substantive motion. I'll put the substantive motion. You can speak on it. Yep. I'll put that's now the substantive motion. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. That is concluded. Yep. Rightio. We'll deal with the procedural matters. Public forum, confirmation of the minutes. Back to page 6. Someone to second? We're doing the minutes. Councillor Fulton, you're second? I think you were absent. Oh no, you were there. My mistake. Okay, moved Mrs. Payne, seconded Councillor Fulton. Those in favour?
Mr. Chair, can I just raise an issue, please? With
A bit
regard.
late.
Well, I tried to get in you again pretty fast there, Todd. I'm not a member of this committee, but I would like to be noted that I left the room on item 12 and didn't return.
Was that amendment? No, not a member of the committee. Well, it's noted in the minutes. Okay, I'll put the minutes. Did I put them? In the past. Okay, status report, Plan and Regulatory Committee. No one to speak to that. I suppose you'll see in terms of the land development manual review, something in my chairperson's report about that, and you've had the briefings on the Nelson Plan update, so there's no staff to speak to those two matters. So I'm prepared to move. Status report be received. Someone to second. Councillor Ward. I'll put it. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to the chairperson's report, taken as read. There's no recommendations. That I move that report be received. Someone to second. Mrs. Payne. Any questions anyone wants to raise with me? Thank you.
Just a comment. I like that you included, Mr. Chairman, that the meeting was held at Petit Fleur. I think it's nice that that's in the report. Gives you, nice visuals.
Thank you. Okay, I put the motion that the report be received, and the contents noted. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks very much. Mrs. Parfitt. Page 20. Oh, rightio. We'll deal with number 27, page 27. I've got a bit ahead of myself. Parking control bylaws, amendments to Elton Street, Trafalgar Street, and St Vincent Street, and Rogers Street.
And Vanguard Street.
And Vanguard Street. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take the report as read.
Yes.
And
Any questions of Mrs. Parfitt? I have a question in terms of Elton Street. The request, there's a linger node there, or a sort of a placemaking facility out the front. The request to go to the P15, where did that come from?
The Alton Street was part of a placemaking trial.
Yeah.
So the council passed a resolution that they could do that. The platform went in December, taking 2 existing P15 car parks, and the ones that were remaining were P60, but when the trial was first socialised amongst the other retailers, they had mistakenly assumed that the P15 would be transferred to the remaining car parks. That didn't happen, and they're now requesting that happen.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you. I'm not 100% clear as to what happens in December with the trial. Would you be able to tell us about that, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, whether the platform remains or not will come back to council. Gabrielle and somewhere on the fourth floor, my apologies, is doing an assessment of that pilot. And our understanding is at the moment that the retailers would like to, if the platform is to remove, to keep the other car parks as P15, so that 4 car parks out of that total would be P15 and not revert back to P60.
We're just basically deal with the parking issue. Any other questions? Right, someone to move the recommendations? Moved Councillor Ward, seconded Councillor Fulton. I'll put the recommendation as in the agenda. Those in favour? Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Back to you, Ms. Barton. Page 21.
Page 21, this report relates to the Montgomery Square, and currently in the bylaw there is no statement regarding the removal of vehicles that are parked there during the duration of the market time period. So what we're proposing to do is make sure that the bylaw does cover this off, and then enables us to remove vehicles if we need to. There is currently signage up advising people not to park there during certain hours, which is 3 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Over that weekend period, and this is making sure that we've got our bylaw to cover everything that needs to.
Thank you. So how, I'm sorry if I've missed it, but how, if we do this, how will we be able to distinguish between stall holders' cars and other people's cars?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I understand it that the stall holders' cars have permits, or they advise that they're part of the market operation, and those that would be down there doing the removal anyway, it's generally before the market is actually set up, so it's in that period where, 6 a.m. in the morning, there are cars that have been parked there overnight, and it's quite clear.
Gotcha.
It's an issue.
Through the chair, does the market operator want us to do this?
Through the chair, they want us to be able to remove vehicles, so if this is the mechanism to enable that to happen, then yes, they're supportive.
Okay, and my last question is, at present, when we move a car, who pays for it?
So through you, Mr. Chair, at the moment, I think we as council have been absorbing that cost.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a presumption that in fact the cars will be removed probably because the market tells you that these ones aren't supposed to be here as well, or do we go around automatically and clear them out?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would be acting on advice in a lot of cases that they have been there and that the market have found them to be a problem. Yes. So through you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Ghibellini prepared this report, but she is unavailable this week. So the suggestion here is that we, as a council, make a submission to Tasman District Council, who have received a private plan change application from Progressive Enterprises to put a supermarket on the corner of Salisbury and Champion Roads. The submission that is attached highlights two issues, or potential issues, that we have some concern with. One relates to traffic effects on a busy existing roading hierarchy of which traverses into Nelson City Council's boundaries, and the other is the potential impact on the Stoke Commercial Centre. So it's those two grounds that we've raised in this draft submission that's attached. So through you, Mr. Chair, we can't raise trade competition as a grounds for the submission. So if we were saying we own a supermarket and we object to the fact there's another supermarket, then that's not grounds. But given that it's a broader economic impact on a whole commercial centre, yes, we can raise that as an issue.
Yes, I think I support this. I would have preferred, had we had the time, that it go through council, because there are implications for traffic and other matters that would be properly considered by the Works Infrastructure Committee. But the submission's closed on 26th of April, which is next week, so we can't do that, and so it doesn't go through council before we do it. But yeah, it makes sense that we, on behalf of the Stoke community in particular, that we make this submission in the form that's been proposed. So I support the motion.
Councillor Matheson, then Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I wish to to comment on this, and especially with regard to the transport issues which we've all been talking about in the last couple of weeks. We already have a problem with the roundabout at Railwood Fresh and Champion Road, the introduction of a supermarket on that corner, and rumours are rife there will be another enterprise on the other side, which will attract as many, if not more, makes those 3 roundabouts in that area completely redundant. And this raises the big question that we've got to look at right now. It's at capacity. By the introduction of these 2 enterprises and whatever else in that area, we then have to revert back to the ownership. So one roundabout belongs to TDC, one belongs to NCC, and one belongs to NZTA. And if some of you can remember, we had quite a very expensive $1 million discussion about those a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, and they were put on hold. I think, first of all, we must in our submission put a huge emphasis on that, because if we're going to be doing work in Stoke with regard to transport matters on that main road to be able to fit the vision of Stoke in the future, that is going to have a huge impact. Wakatu Drive is where they should be going when you want to commute. That's what it was built for. But to try and generate this sort of traffic on that corner up there is going to be total chaos. The effect is also going to go onto Champion Road, onto the Ridgeway, onto that whole catchment area is just not built for this sort of traffic volume. So I really do seriously think we're going to have a major, major problem, both councils, if we don't deal with that issue of traffic first.
Councillor Laurie.
Thank you. I'm speaking in full support of the recommendation, and I'd like to congratulate Ms. Gabellini for the report. It's not often in these profit-obsessed times that someone steps up and says no to a major, massive company. And too often in New Zealand we take a short-term, fast-buck view of the world. This is the opposite of that, and I think it's a really, really good step. So, well done.
Ms. Shrika.
I just had a quick question. I believe the corner of Champion and Salisbury, there's a funeral home that currently allocates that space. Has any thought been given, or have they been consulted as to what's happening with them?
I'll let Ms. Martin answer this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, they will be a party that will have been notified of the application or the plan change, so it'll be over to them to what they do. Yep.
Councillor Ward.
This is an activity which has been provided for in Richmond and in Stoke. Those are the appropriate places for it. A standalone shopping precinct here is at odds. Do we have a?
We have. It's okay.
We have one. Okay. This is at odds with our plan, existing plan. It's at odds with the interest of our community. It provides nothing that they don't already have access to, very close at hand in either direction. But the traffic implications are huge, and I don't actually think there is an engineering solution to it, to be quite frank. So I think that on both of those grounds, we have good arguments for doing nothing. It doesn't mean to say that there couldn't be other activities of a smaller, more intimate nature, which I would put them more up into the neighbourhoods themselves. But that's different again. Those would be activities primarily for the folk who live in that neighbourhood. This is not such an activity. This is an activity for people from further afield. So it's a must that you put in there.
Councillor Fulton.
Having heard comments from other councillors, if we wanted to, Ms. Gabellini, to amend the words within the submission slightly to, I guess, reinforce what she's saying more strongly, I think that's what Councillor Matheson's looking for. Would we need to change that in the recommendation, or is that something staff can do based on what they've heard today?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've deliberately kept the submission at a broad, high level, so that we can capture all issues when we give evidence, which we will have to do.
Okay.
So we've captured what's been said around the table today, and that will be included as part of that evidence.
Okay, and through the chair, I have a subsequent question to that. When you give evidence, like if Tasman District Council is of the mind to approve the proposed plan change, which they might do, is that the point in time when we look for revenue to mitigate the effects, so to address the roundabouts, you know, would it be, or is it sensible for Nelson City Council to say, if TDC chooses to approve, then there's an expectation that that Progressive Enterprises bears that cost of having to improve the transport network. How do you get around, because obviously that's the issue, and if it's approved, who will foot the bill? I would have thought that
I'll let Ms. Martin answer that question.
go back to them.
So through you, Mr Chair, as part of the plan change process,
Yeah.
Progressive Enterprises will have to provide all of their evidence to support the application.
Yeah.
In relation to traffic, they will have to say what the effects are, and they will have to say how they're proposing to mitigate that.
So they have to come up with a proposal.
Yes. And then the commissioners who will be determining it will say, is that adequate or not? If it's not, they can decline the plan change, and if it is, then they can potentially approve it. At that point, we as a council can then say potentially we might appeal it. So that would be another decision that would need to come back here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also speaking in support of the recommendation for a couple of reasons. Well, actually three good reasons. One is the impact it will have on the Stoke community. The second reason is we've already delayed the 3 roundabout study, part of the regional land transport plan that's been put off, and it's recognised already that is a choke point in our roading network, and have a supermarket or that kind of commercial activity at this stage does have some potentially adverse effects. And probably the third reason is the growth growing up in terms of residential housing and future growth in the Daylin subdivision area, which is all traffic that comes down Champion Road into the roading network. It's quite proper that we raise these issues with the commissioners, and this is the appropriate process to do it. So I'm speaking in favour of those reasons. Right, now speaking of there, I'll put the motion. Someone moved? It's moved and seconded. Moved. Moved, Councillor Ward, Councillor Laurie. Okay, I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. I believe that concludes the business today, so meeting is closed at 2:40 p.m.